Nvidia posted $81.6 billion in revenue last quarter, up 85% year over year, $48.5 billion in free cash flow in a single quarter. Data center networking alone hit $14.8 billion, nearly triple what it was a year ago. By every traditional metric, this is the most dominant stretch in the history of the semiconductor industry. And yet, chip stocks just had one of their worst weeks of the year, Nvidia included. Part of the selling pressure traces back to a question that's been building for months. How much of Nvidia's revenue ecosystem is self-reinforcing in a way that should make investors uncomfortable? The word on trading desks and research notes is circular financing. Nvidia invests in companies. Those companies buy Nvidia's GPUs. Nvidia books the revenue. The cycle continues. The two names at the center of this are CoreWeave and Nebius, GPU cloud providers known as neoclouds. Nvidia holds roughly 11% of CoreWeave, about 47 million shares worth close to $5 billion was at recent prices. It disclosed a 9.3% stake in Nebius. Both stakes were built through equity investments of around $2 billion each. The comparison people reach for is Cisco in 2000. Back then, Cisco was lending money to small telecom operators so they could afford to buy Cisco's routers. When those telcos went under, Cisco ate billions in bad debt and the stock collapsed. The fear is that Nvidia is doing the same thing with extra steps, but the structure is different in ways that matter. Nvidia's $2 billion into CoreWeave is equity, ownership, not a loan. If CoreWeave goes to zero, Nvidia writes off a minority stake. It doesn't chase bad receivables across a balance sheet, and the scale doesn't match the narrative. CoreWeave's 2026 capital expenditure target is $35 billion. Nvidia's $2 billion is less than 6% of that. The other 94% comes from debt facilities, contracted revenue, and operating cash flow. More importantly, look at who's actually paying. CoreWeave's backlog is close to $100 billion. The anchor customers aren't startups burning venture capital. Meta committed up to $62 billion across CoreWeave and Nebius combined. Microsoft committed roughly $60 billion in neocloud agreements. These are companies with investment-grade credit ratings spending money they already budgeted. Meta's 2026 operating cash flow forecast is $136 billion. They're not using neoclouds because they can't afford GPUs. They're using them because building data centers takes years, neocloud capacity comes online in months, and the accounting is cleaner. A neocloud contract shows up as operating expense spread over 6 years. Building the same capacity in-house shows up as capital expenditure in a single year, and Meta's CapEx guidance is already $125 to $145 billion. So the Cisco comparison breaks on mechanics, but it points at something real. Nvidia's biggest customers are also learning to build their own chips. Broadcom designs custom AI accelerators for Google and Meta. Marvell builds them for Amazon and Microsoft. Every major hyperscaler has an internal silicon team working on ASIC alternatives to Nvidia's GPUs. The risk isn't that the financing is circular, it's that the customers at the end of the circle are building the capability to leave it. Nvidia's revenue depends on a small group of companies that are simultaneously its biggest buyers and its future competitors. That's the structural problem no amount of quarterly earnings can fully resolve. And it explains what Nvidia has been doing, quietly, systematically for the past 6 months. In March 2026, Nvidia invested $2 billion in Lumentum, not just an equity check. The deal included multi-billion-dollar purchase commitments and rights to future production capacity. Lumentum makes the lasers and photodetectors that go inside optical transceivers and co-packaged optics modules, the components that turn electrical signals into light. 2 months later, Nvidia and Corning announced a multi-year partnership. Corning will expand its U.S. optical connectivity manufacturing capacity by 10 times. Fiber production up more than 50%. 3 new factories in North Carolina and Texas, over 3,000 jobs. Nvidia is prepaying to secure that supply. The company disclosed $119 billion in total supply commitments and multi-year optics agreements with Coherent, Lumentum, and Corning combined. Around the same time, Nvidia launched Spectrum XGS, a networking platform built specifically for connecting multiple data centers and into what Jensen Huang called a single unified supercomputer. Not a product for linking racks inside one building, a product for linking buildings across a region. Then came the fiber. Wolfe Research disclosed in July that Nvidia is buying long-haul dark fiber across the United States. Fiber counts reaching up to 100 pairs. Dark fiber is cable that's already in the ground but has never been activated. You buy the glass, you choose your own optical equipment, you light it on your own terms. Needham estimates the project could cost $5 to $10 billion over 3 years. Line all of this up and the pattern is clear. Lumentum gives Nvidia the optical components. Corning gives it the fiber and cable. Spectrum, XGS, gives it the networking protocol. Dark fiber gives it the physical backbone. And the neoclouds, OSM, CoreWeave, Nebius, give it the tenants. Nvidia is building a vertically integrated AI infrastructure stack that goes from the GPU die all the way down to the glass in the ground. If you watched our CPO video, you saw how Nvidia's Quantum X Q3450 switch cut power consumption from 7 kilowatts to 3.95 by moving the optical engine onto the same substrate as the switch chip, eliminating 12 inches of copper and the DSP that cleaned up the mess. That solved the last meter problem. You may know them. Spectrum XGS solves the last mile problem, connecting switches across buildings. Dark fiber solves the last 100 miles problem, connecting data centers across the country. The company that started as a GPU vendor now controls 3 layers of the physical stack that its competitors cannot replicate with a better chip. An ASIC can replace a GPU, it cannot replace a fiber optic backbone. That's the strategic logic. Wolfe Research called it the ultimate insurance policy against the rise of ASICs. But insurance implies defense. What Nvidia is building looks more like a new business model, one where it doesn't just sell the hardware, but operates the infrastructure that delivers AI compute to the customer. The neocloud investments make more sense through this lens. CoreWeave and Nebius aren't just GPU buyers, they're distribution channels. And dark fiber is the pipe that connects them. The ambition is enormous, but ambition and execution are different things. Nvidia has never operated telecom-grade infrastructure. A national fiber network involves regulatory approvals, right-of-way access, equipment deployment across hundreds of locations, and the kind of operational discipline that companies like AT&T built over decades. The activation cycle for dark fiber, from acquisition to full commercial operation, typically runs 18 to 36 months. Needham and Wolfe both noted that traditional telecom operators take 5 to 7 years to complete that journey. Nvidia is trying to do it in 3. The neocloud side carries its own weight. CoreWeave reported $2.1 billion in quarterly revenue, but has $51 billion in total liabilities. Nebius is targeting $22.5 billion in 2026 capital expenditure. These companies are growing fast and spending faster. The dark fiber strategy only works if the tenants, the neoclouds, survive long enough to use the network. If utilization rates disappoint or debt markets tighten, Nvidia ends up with expensive glass in the ground, and not enough traffic to justify it. And then there's the question of relationships. Nvidia's largest GPU customers, the hyperscalers, are also the companies whose cloud dominance Nvidia is trying to route around. AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud have spent decades building their own global fiber networks, their own data center footprints, their own customer relationships. Nvidia building a competing infrastructure layer doesn't go unnoticed. It changes the dynamic from supplier-customer to supplier-customer-competitor. The same tension we covered in our Marvell video, where Nvidia's $2 billion investment raised the question of partnership versus absorption, now plays out at a much larger scale across an entire ecosystem. Nvidia guided Q2 revenue to $91 billion. It's adding fiber to a business that already generates more free cash flow in 3 months than most companies generate in a decade. The financial capacity is not in question. The question is whether a chip company can become an infrastructure operator before its customers become chip companies. That's the race. Nvidia is betting the answer is fiber, that controlling the physical layer gives it leverage no ASIC can take away. The hyperscalers are betting the answer is silicon, that owning the chip means owning the customer. Both sides have the resources to see their bets through. And the outcome depends on a timeline neither side fully controls. How fast custom ASICs close the performance gap, and how fast Nvidia can light up a network that doesn't exist yet. The lever Nvidia is building is the longest one in the industry. The question is whether it's long enough to move the market before the market moves on without it.